away from God.
Go.
Or gods. I'm quite interested, I do research about children, and I'm quite interested in this idea of home and quest. I don't study literature, but the ideas of home and quest, I think people often think of children's books as being about adventures, but then I wonder as well if actually adults are quite keen on telling children about how nice home is. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about this idea of the sort of home versus journey of children's writing for children.
I Got It From the Forest is about fairy stories. And one of the questions that it takes up very seriously is in whose interest have we decided these stories are too cruel, too punitive, always in the interest of grown-ups, because the only people who get punished in Grimm's fairy stories, almost the only people, are the people who are bad parents. You bet parents don't want that in the stories. You bet they don't want to be discover that if they're not a good mother, they'll be put in a barrel full of knives and thrown down a river. Of course they don't. They very sensibly have decided their poor little ones couldn't cope with it. That's one way of looking at the development of the story. I think that for a lot of children, to go back to what I was actually saying, for a lot of children's literature, the idea that you re-find home is, at its best, an attempt to say that you can go out of home safely, that there is a point of return that you can get back. I think one of the great books, the great modern books for very small children, is Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are. It seems to me that that absolutely catches the structure of a fundamental fairy story. Somebody goes away from home for complicated reasons of rejection of home. They encounter some genuinely frightening things, the wild things, which they cope with entirely through their own skills. And when they've actually got to manage the wild things, they go home and have supper. Cool. And I think that's a beautiful story that is both. That what the child there is, do people know this book? It's just one of the great books, stuff Dickens, really. So I think that originally, I think a lot of stories for children were grounded in a very kind of conscious and deliberate morality. First, being children's literature, it was, you'd be a good child or else. And the repudiation at the beginning of the 20th century of crude fairy stories was precisely because they weren't very ethical. You certainly did not want your children behaving in this way. But the idea of going out, learning something and coming back, and into the forest, or onto the island, or into some difficult modern situation. But it's okay when you get home again. You will be a better person in some curious way, but you'll still get supper. And your teddy bear will still be waiting. I do think we culturally underestimate the toughness of well children. I think they really, really like vicious punishments of baddies. Because they know that they aren't that bad. They think it's a really good idea that the witch at the end of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs should have to put on red-hot metal shoes and dance till she's dead. Go! I've tried it out on many of my nieces and nephews who are smaller than my children. And I haven't met one who said, "Oh dear, how frightening!" They all said, "Yes!" They're not very nice, small children, are they? I think just small children's literature would improve. I'll tell you a story that I think is very interesting, and that is The Machine Gunners. People know that. I've now, of course, forgotten the name. Who wrote that? Thank you. It is a story about parents failing children, not in any evil or wicked way, but it takes place during the Second World War in the Northeast. And what it is parents so exhausted that the children kind of slip away from them. There's just a hideous scene when father tries to make his son swear on the Bible that he's telling the truth, and the son knows that his father's not paying attention because he doesn't believe in the Bible, he never has, and this is a new thing. Daddy's just too tired to focus. And the consequences are horrendous, although also to some extent resolved. And I think that that's a story that really takes on the toughness of kids under pressure in really interesting ways. They form a very tight gang, they look after each other, but they become completely severed from the culture of their grown-ups. Don't think it's a good book. It takes a kind of moral stand around children that is, I think, still quite unusual. The soft version of that are things like Swallows and Amazons, where the kids do seriously bad things. Brenda Chase. Brenda Chase, a fabulous book. Philip Pullman wrote an introduction to a reprint of it, which he said, it's lucky this book got written when it did, because it could never be written now. Children go into the woods and kill things in lavish quantities. He said, but that's only the beginning of the problem. The real problem is that at the end of the book, the final sentence is, these children run into the woods not because they're oppressed, abused, victimised, or anything. They run into the woods because they're bored. And they disappear, and they let their parents or their grown-ups extremely unhappy for over a year. They do finally get caught. The kind of closing paragraph is that it took many months before they had expiated through painful backsides the consequences of their selfish actions. But he's still on the kid's side, and so clearly is the writer. And indeed, so is Philip Pullman. I think we have got rather... Have I in any way addressed your question?
It was a sort of starting point, I think. So, it started something.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I got rather carried away there.